Hello everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our conversation today on the ethics in the age of digital finance. My name is Katel Le Goulven. I'm from INSEAD with the Hoffman Institute, an institute which has for mission to integrate sustainability into everything that INSEAD does. So I'm one of your hosts today, and this event is co-hosted with the Observatoire de la Finance. I don't know if we say that in English sometimes. Anyway, the Observatory of Finance. Maybe they're not used to saying their name in English. Anyway, so today to discuss about this very important topic, we have gathered a great group of experts and advocates. And basically, we're going to organize the events in three main moments. We'll first have an introduction to our conversation, as well as the presentation of the prize by the co-president of the jury, because today we're not only discussing about this important topic, we're also launching a prize that all of you can apply to. We'll then have a round table with different people and experts who are related to the prize in one way or another, and I'll introduce them later. And we'll finally have a Q&A session with all of you. Let's dive in, and I'm happy to introduce the person who's going to help us kick off that event, and it's INSEAD's Deputy Dean, Peter Zensky. So Peter is he's our Deputy Dean here, based in Fontainebleau, like me. He's on campus, you can tell, very professional, while I'm at home, working from home, like all of us. Peter is also Professor of Strategy at INSEAD, and he's leading everything digital at INSEAD. But I mean everything. So, and he's also a big proponent of competitions for our students and our alumni as well. So basically, he's a great person to kick us off today. Hi, Peter.
Very good. Well, very good. Good to see everyone. On, I guess, behalf of INSEAD and our partner, Observatoire de la Finance, really welcome to the event. Thanks for taking time for this important topic. I'm personally quite excited about it for a few reasons. First of all, we know that like the two biggest macro trends hitting business and society accelerated by the pandemic are, on the one hand, the digitalization and the data transformation of business and society, and at the same time, increasing awareness and urgency to pay attention to the practice of responsible business, where decisions are made taking into account not just financial returns, but also the broader impact on people and the planet. And what excites me about events like this one and this prize is it's looking at the intersection of these two trends, right? So there are big intersections. All of these digital and tech tools are giving even more power for impact to business leaders. And so there's potential to address, fundamental issues of social progress, address sustainability and planetary issues, but also there's even more of an ability to make a mess. And certainly finance would have to be one of the industries, if not the industry, that's maybe the most pressing here. First of all, as I guess you all know, finance has a hugely vibrant ecosystem today around tech. A lot of the leading technologies, whether AI or blockchain, have great use cases here. You've got not only fintechs, big tech players play in the space, obviously, and many traditional players have gotten tech savvy. At the same time, finance has traditionally been a pain point, a tension point between business and society. There's a reason why, through bitter lessons, we've come to regulate finance so heavily. There's lots of issues with moral hazard. The complexity makes the market mechanism difficult sometimes, and so on. But I just, as you think about entering this contest, think about how huge the stakes are, right? We don't call it capitalism for nothing. It's magic whether you give like an entrepreneur $10 million or you give an individual $5,000 or euros to go educate themselves. The magic is if you do that well, you give them that money, and a year, 2 years, 3 years later, they've got twice as much money, and that's a huge value creation. And yet, when people don't have access to that mechanism, can't get financial services, they're really frozen out of economic livelihood. And when the whole system breaks down with systemic issues, we all hurt and hurt bad. And I think the real challenge, though, is with all of this technology change, it's just not possible for regulation to keep up with the change. And so we absolutely have a critical need for the ethical practice of finance in these like incredibly turbocharged markets. And again, it's for the integrity of the whole system that brings prosperity to humanity across the planet. Really then for this event, I think our objectives are twofold. It's just to get all of us thinking more deeply about this very timely topic. And obviously, we're going to try and stimulate you to apply for the Global Prize on Ethics and Trust in Finance for a Sustainable Future. That kind of competition and such is great, open to all sort of young, aspiring leaders in the community. If we're successful, you should leave this conversation with lots of ideas that you'd like to put on paper for how we could address this major challenge facing us in terms of ethics and finance. So anyway, thank you for inviting me in, Ketal. I look forward to the event.
Thanks, Peter, for bringing the energy, for showcasing how this topic indeed mattered today, for also helping us, calling on all of you, the youth, because we passed the age where we can apply, even though you can see we come in here with a passion. It's for all of you to reflect on this theme and to apply to the prize. And we couldn't have anybody better to present this prize to us than Josina Kimmerling. She is the co-president of the jury for the prize. So she is coming here as a very seasoned associate with the prize, but also as someone with power who ultimately will also make decisions. Josina is in her professional life has spent 35 years in the financial domain with different hats. And she's currently, her latest hat is as the head of regulatory outreach with the CFA Institute. And I went back to the mission of the CFA Institute because that's important here, which is to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence for the ultimate benefit of society. Important mission to recall in a day and age where this is not always obvious when we look at the finance world. Josina, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Over to you to introduce this important prize to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ketal, and thank you for reminding us all of the mission of CFA Institute. And ethics indeed is at the heart of the DNA of anybody who bears the designation of a CFA charter holder. And it's my pride, therefore, to be co-president of the jury together with Professor Paul Dembinski. The prize was launched in 2006. And really, it was meant as a prize to attract young people, because very often regulation in financial markets is made by older people, middle-aged people, for other middle-aged people. And more we realize that finance and the economy, well, it's the future. And when we talk about sustainability, it's even more about the future. So young people have to have their say. And I'll briefly describe some of the essays that have really marked me as a member of the jury and co-president of the jury. So it's a prize for under 35s. It's looking at ethics in finance, looking at banking, what are the issues in the banking world, trust and integrity, the digital world complexity. And over the years, we have a whole population of laureates coming from all across the globe. Really very inspirational. And you can look at the website and see some of the essays and previous prize winners. So we want young people to be creative, to come with a topic, short topic. Really, we leave you a lot of leeway to develop it. the price is also monetized. So there is $20,000, which is awarded to all the prize winners, which is normally three prize winners. We have a shorter deadline, so it's the 31st of May 2021. But I think what is also good is we've been trying through the years to develop language editions. We used to have a Spanish language edition, Hispanic language edition, but that unfortunately it stopped. But we'll try and do that again. But we have a French edition, we have a German edition, and we have a Polish edition. You can apply to any of these, and then the laureates of those editions will come up to the final rounds of the global prize. So there is an opportunity to either write in the language which you feel most comfortable with, or do it in the global language of finance, which is English, of course. What is important is that this prize really is regarded by people like Christine Lagarde, by the commissioners of the finance division at the EU Commission, by central bank governors like François Villeroy de Galhau, the governor of the Banque de France, by the OECD Secretary General, as really important in promoting a discussion on ethics in finance. So your careers will be led by this prize in a way. And previous prize winners have gone on to career changes, working in the ethics and finance sphere, or gaining notoriety and speaking out. So there are so many different opportunities. The CFA Institute, together with Euroclear, Fondation Pictet, SWIFT Institute, OECD, and ACCD are very active supporters and have been there for quite a long time. We support it by distributing it, but also by really being very actively involved. But I would say, and I would like to come back, Catel, to 2 points that Peter referred to in his speech, saying that finance is a pain point, and also that it is not possible for regulation to keep up with change. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we think about the digital era. It is very, very hard for regulators to keep up. Now, if you go to Ross Murdoch, who won the first prize in the 2014 edition, he talked about how behavioral ethics is important also for young people, that they need to understand how to do the right thing. And he talked about an ethics CV. And I thought that was really interesting because it brings about how important ethics is. Marta Rocchi, who of course was the first prize ex aequo at the last edition and will be speaking in the panel, she looked at it through whether it's agent or accented. How do you look at ethics? And I think that, again, that distinction, trying to analyze that distinction is very important. And then other prize winners like Joshi Prabé, who won first prize ex aequo in the 2012 edition, looked at the lessons learned from the LIBOR scandal. So the scandals have an impact. And Babatunde Valentine Onabajo, who got the prize in 2016, looked at when banks do not always know best. Now, if you read the FT, you do realize that banks do not always know best. And I open my newspaper every day and it doesn't stop. The scandals keep coming. And I think for that, I will leave with just an action that we do at CFA Institute, which is taking it beyond the ethics code by having also practical case studies that our charter holders bring in and showing you how to behave with ethics, is giving voice to value. And that is key. You have to walk the talk. And with that, I will open up to the panel. Thank you, Catel.
Thank you. It's a wonderful transition to what's to come, Justina. So you've heard, irrespective of your age, you have to be under 35, of your language or your culture or your background, you can contribute. And if you already have questions on some practicalities of the prize, ask them. I'm also joined by Dr. Vigile Perret, with whom we also prepared for this event, who's here also in the back end, ready to answer live to the questions that you may have. Now, moving to our panel, I'm delighted to welcome the person behind all this, Paul Dembinski. Paul is the director of the Observatoire de la Finance. he is the co-founder, the founder of this prize, and he's the person whom I met and who convinced me that it was important for Observatoire de la Finance and INSEAD to look at these issues and to talk about these themes together. The introduction I want to mention was made by Professor Henri-Claude de Bettini, whom I think is watching us. If he is, I would like to thank him. So Paul, the Observatoire de la Finance mission is to promote awareness of ethical concerns in financial activities and the financial sector. You have published extensively on these themes. You have promoted in a number of fora. So to start the conversation with our panelists, I'd like to invite you to share your views and your thoughts. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Catel. It's really a pleasure being here with you. And thank you, Catel, for moderating. Thank you for the cooperation in setting up this event with the Hoffman Institute. And I think it's a great first step that we do together. I will try to address one or two key points that seem to me to be key points when we think about finance in the age of digitalization, and what are the concerns, ethical entry points that seems to me fundamental. So it is obvious that during the last year, finance digitalization has made an immense leap forward. 2 years ago, we could have discussed the pros and the cons of digitalization from the finance perspective. Today, we know that there is no alternative. There is no alternative. We have to live with this digitalization as long as our system keeps together. So we know that we cannot do without it, but it means that we have to understand it and to have an ethical reading of this process and also of our responsibilities. So especially when we look from activities for which digitalization is at very core. So first point, digitalization has created a virtual world based on data, graphs, and all kinds of metrics. This world is a reflection of the reality, but is a partial reflection, a selective reflection, and possibly time to time a distortive reflection. A little bit like looking at our faces in this conference is not the same as looking at the persons behind the faces. So virtuality provides the impression to be the reflection of reality, but really is not fully. So therefore, the first ethical concern in finance and everywhere where we deal with digitalization is not to lose contact with reality. So the reality check, going beyond or behind the figures, the graphs, and the numbers to understand what is behind, I think is the first ethical concern that we need to share and to develop as being a first step towards better ethical awareness of digital harness and awareness in times of digitalization. The second point I would like to address is the fact that artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning are all tools widely used not only in finance, but also in finance. They are at the very core of many fintech products and solutions. They provide the users with the automated way for decision making. But the decision to use such a tool, to go for automation, has to be a prudent decision, a conscious decision with the required due diligence. And this due diligence has also an ethical dimension. What is the scope of delegation? What are the terms of the delegation? What are the monitoring tools? How then we trust the errors? What are the effects on the weak party on which we have delegated the power to the machine? And so on and so on. All these are ethical questions that are not self-evident. They have to be kept in mind by those that take the decisions of automation, which cannot be left only to a cost-benefit analysis or thinking. So ethical dimension has to be present in these places where we use artificial intelligence, big data, and machine learning tools. The third point is the fact that digitalization breeds complexity, and complexity tends to blur the sense of responsibility. No, it's not me, it's the system. No, it's not me, it's not you, it's the procedure, it's the routine, it's the batch, it's something outside of my reach. This is an easy answer, which to some extent takes away the sense of responsibility. And the distance between what I do and the consequences of my deed extend further and further. I call it, and others call it also, the moral distance. And this moral distance has to be not only acknowledged, but has to be addressed. Because if we do not monitor, if we do not harness this moral distance, we enter slowly in field of irresponsibility. Nobody is in charge. Of course, lawyers will trace responsibility, but I'm speaking about responsibility at ex ante of the doer, not of somebody who is sitting in the jail on the bench. So very important, addressing the moral distance. And the fourth and last point, it has to do also with moral distancing, because if it's getting not unaddressed, if it's left as it is, and is progressing with digitalization, then we will witness a moral regression. And this moral regression will leave all the field to regulators, to sanctions, and to lawyers. Young professionals will be left without moral compass because simply in their teaching, in their training, in corporate culture, in professional deontology, the ethical issue would not have been forgotten. So in order to compensate for moral distance and to avoid moral regression, we need to build the awareness of ethical issues in finance in times of digitalization. And I think the chance for young people to write, to think about this and writing their paper for the competition is just a nice opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Very academic and with a lot of gravitas. We know that these issues are very important. Thanks for delivering them this way to us today. And so our panelists here, I don't know, Anna, if you can bring up the slide to present them, have also an intimate connection with the prize. Stéphane Bernard has been involved with the prize for many years. He's a member of the jury. Marta Rocci and Brett Scott are two past winners of the prize. So I'm going to be asking them questions about that relationship with the prize, but also from their perspective on the topic that is at hand with us here today. Let me start with you, Stéphane. Thank you so much for joining us. You, as I was saying, you've been a member of the jury for a year, so you're a big advocate of, finance and ethics, ethical consideration of finance, whatever the flavor of the day is. In your day job, you also are director with Euroclear, who is one of the strategic partner of the prize, as we heard it earlier. So can you tell me why an organization like Euroclear cares about the issues we're debating on today?
Thank you, Kathleen. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Kathleen, for the great organization and your invitation today. Well, it's a very broad question, but the answer is very simple, Kathleen. As a market financial infrastructure, as an FMI serving and supporting the market, indeed the prize is for us very important. As the prize aims to promote, as mentioned by Paul and Josina, to promote new ways of thinking about, well, rather big challenges we are facing globally, but also in particular in our industry. And as Josina just mentioned, looking at ethics is also speaking about ethics, encouraging those young people to explore, to reflect on ethical questions in a transparent and in accessible and more inclusive, honest manner is key to continue to further foster and nurture the debate. The strategic intent is to encourage our staff under 35 to take their pen, to stand up, to get involved in the reflection and write an essay. Write an essay in their own language. They can use different languages that are supported by the prize, and are reviewed by the jury in a very thorough manner. And then those contributors, and we have two with us today, are in fact becoming ambassadors, and they contribute to increase awareness and contribute to increase the debate about those important elements in our industry. They create also themselves a network where young people start to pose sometimes very good questions in the business they are involved in on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And we see and we observe very clearly that those type of questions are more and more important for young generation. Look at the involvement of young people in domain like CSR, in domain like ESG, and it will become more and more prominent in the future. So I believe it's key, it's important to support those type of initiatives, simply to listen to the next generation and being able as a financial industry to continue to attract talent to support our industry and serve our clients.
Yes, thank you, to attract talent and to retain talent.
Yeah, exactly.
So that there is also an opportunity within the organization and the financial institution to have that debate and to push the boundaries and the frontiers a little bit also, hopefully.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So our two other panelists today are Marta Rucci. She's an assistant professor at the Dublin City University. Hi, Marta.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation.
Good afternoon. And you are also a previous prize winner. Congratulations, Exposed. And we also delighted to welcome Brett Scott. Hi, Brett. Thanks for being with us.
How's it going?
Brett is an author and a journalist, and he's also a previous prize winner. And the first question I have for the two of you is, why, did you apply to that competition, and what was the impact it had on your personal career or your path, or I won't say your life, but at least on your career in that particular domain. Let me maybe start with you, Brett.
Sure thing. Well, I've been working on issues around financial reform and monetary systems for, I guess, 10 years or so. I also worked in the financial sector and derivative contracts, but started looking at the intersection of big tech and big finance and the increasing automation of the financial sector and all the implications, many of which are quite dystopian, the implications of that. So actually the prize, I was inspired to go and essentially consolidate my thoughts on that matter in the form of an essay. It was very useful precisely because it forced me to put it into a workable form. I actually have a book that's going to be coming out on that, but actually the essay is probably the first instantiation of those ideas. So actually it kind of like scoped out the book for me, as it were.
Yeah, that's great. So I think it's a fantastic encouragement, because when you see that for you a book is coming out, but also you have a regular blog that I think will be posting. I think you're hosting it on Substack, if I'm
sure,
correct. Yeah. So where you also share your thoughts. So it's interesting to see that the prize, accelerated and catalyzed that writing on these important topics from your perspective. Thanks for that. Marta, what about you? What happened? Where did you apply, and did it change anything for you?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Catel, because I think it was a particularly important experience, like participating in the prize. So first of all, it's a prize. So I would say that human nature is a bit competitive, I would say. So we like prizes, we like challenges,
yes.
we like, and also I'm an academic. So I read, I knew the Observatorio della Finanza, and I was following some of the publications that they were issuing, especially those of Professor Dembitsky that spoke before. So it was good also to have the opportunity to have this jury, for example, to read your work. And then I would say then it was, of course, related to my research interests. So I worked on the ethics of finance for a while, and I asked myself questions like, I don't know, can a good person be a good financial trader? Or what is the ethical theory that we can use to best interpret the financial world? So I would say that the prize gave me the occasion to open my research on the ethics of finance to the fintech world, which was under my radar, I would say. But I think it's always good to have the opportunity of writing, you know, as Brett was saying. And then I would say that I was also interested in dialogue with the community of scholars that is around the prize. And actually now all the previous prize winners, we are, thanks to the coordination of Virgil, we are in an alumni network, which is actually working well because we can connect. And I don't know, I think we said this when we met to prepare this webinar. I mean, the prize ceremony was in Paris a couple of years ago. So that was also nice to meet up there with the organizers of the prize. And I'm sure that sooner or later they will come back in presence. So if you're an academic, the prize is a great chance to get your thoughts organized in a structured way and to submit it to this jury. And if you're a practitioner, it's incredible that you have the opportunity to write down your thoughts from a very practical and with a eye on the reality point of view, and these contributions are invaluable. So yeah, it was great to be able to participate in this prize.
Thanks, Marta. And I mean, I don't want to speak for the Observatoire de la Finance. So this year you can have everything, but maybe not the ceremony in Paris. Who knows? I mean, this one is on hold and to be confirmed. Thanks, Marta, for sharing your experience. Let me go back to you, to Brett, and ask you, because of this in-depth work that you've been doing, because you've been you know, really looking at this interface of big tech and finance for years, what are the kind of new ethical issues that you see technology is introducing within finance? Can you want to share with us your perspective on that, please?
Sure, I'll try. I mean, there's many ethical issues, and actually many of the previous prize winners, especially over the last couple of years, have been focusing on the sort of fintech element of finance. Previously, that wasn't the main theme in many financial reform communities, but suddenly it's becoming a theme in financial reform communities as they're starting to see the implications. But the basic way I would frame it is that when you're looking at what's called fintech, it refers often to, at least in the basic instance, two separate forms of automation in finance. The one part is the automation of financial professionals, the people who are sitting in the actual financial institutions, making decisions. So that's where all the stuff around AI is coming in, how that will impact how financial professionals see themselves, whether it will give them, for example, excuses for pointing to models that are making decisions rather than themselves. And I think actually Paul was alluding to some of this when in the sort of the opening sections, talking about this, how it changes the moral structure of how they're thinking about themselves. But there's a second part of fintech, which is all about you might want to call it the reskinning of finance. So it's about the outer layer. It's about the kind of the branch networks, where the financial sector touches people, as it were, the sort of user interface. And that's all the apps. That's all the kind of like digitization of the external layer of finance. And there's a lot of questions there about how that alters the mentality of people who are approaching the financial sector, who de facto historically have always been in a much less powerful position than the financial institutions themselves. So they're always at an information disadvantage. So there's a lot of new questions about whether this sort of reskinning of finance with this kind of superficially slick layer around it in the form of all these apps will change, will potentially reduce ethical awareness of customers who might previously have been at least having some awareness of what's going on behind the scenes, or whether it'll either reduce that or potentially could be used to increase it. But then there's also, maybe the final thing I'd say is, there's a lot of questions about the accountability to retail investors, for example, or not only investors, but actually people who are, for example, borrowers in these new systems where there's increasingly a distance between financial professionals and their decisions, and this having an increasing inability to account for their actions to customers.
Can you give just on the second point, on the reskilling part, can you give a concrete illustration of what could be a particular and a specific, ethical challenge there? Just a concrete example.
Well, for example, I've worked on many different financial campaigns in the past. So, for example, I've worked on divestment campaigns. I've worked on campaigns trying to get around, say, investors, like pensioners, to think about what's happening with their money behind the scenes, because the financial sector that operates at such a large scale that there's a massive distance between, say, an individual pensioner and some investment decision that happens somewhere else in the world. So, for example, a pensioner in the UK might actually be contributing to some rainforest destruction in Costa Rica. All right.
Without being aware.
This huge scale system is what enables that ethical disconnection to occur. All right. Now, this has always been a problem in finance. But the question is, when you increasingly automate the sort of both the actual professionals, but also actually this interaction layer, so in financial campaigns I've worked on, part of what we've been trying to do is to increase that sense of among, say, pensioners or depositors and banks about, trying to think about their impact far away. Yeah. Okay. Now, but if you think about the entire way the fintech sector presents itself, it's always about slickness, speed, automation. Don't think about anything, basically. It'll just happen automatically. Now, on the one hand, that is viewed as positive by certain people in a sort of frenetic world that can be presented as a naturally positive thing. But from an ethical perspective, it's quite dubious. And actually, most philosophical traditions would not endorse a sort of fly through the world without thinking about it type of mentality. But this is the dominant way that all startups will present themselves.
Thank you so much. I think it's extremely important because it also reflects the increasing complexity and the difficulty to change systemic issues of this increasingly complex system. So, Marta, let me come to you and ask you about more, let's say, foundational questions. And actually, we have some questions that are coming up, including one from Malcolm about definitions. So, what kind of ethical inquiry do we need to address these new challenges raised by the digitalization of finance? Exemplified for us.
Yeah, exactly. No, thanks for this question, Catel, because I think this is an essential question to ask when we are to talk about the ethics of finance, because as also this question that came in said, ethics is not one thing. No, that's what our participant said. So ethics, I would say that it's important to go back to basics and to define what ethics is. So I would say that we can define ethics as a theoretical and a practical study of human behavior, but to achieve personal excellence and to contribute to the good of society. So of course, this definition already has kind of an orientation towards a particular meaning of ethics, but what we can see is that this is a discipline, it's a philosophical discipline, it's part of philosophy. So it suggests us both a theoretical reflection on, let's say, the ultimate meaning of our actions, but it also helps us to have a practical reflection on the meaning and the sense for our actions. And we need to apply all this to the world of finance. So for example, what Malcolm was asking is that there's so many ethical approaches. How can we choose the approach which is the best for the world of finance? So I think Josina, in her speech at the beginning, she mentioned this approach that I actually, it's in the essay that I submitted for the prize, which is the distinction between those approaches to ethics that are act-centered and those approaches to ethics that are more person-centered, agent-centered. So I would say that the approaches that Malcolm mentions there, like the utilitarianist approach and the deontological approach, would be more act-centered. They would be more related to whether a particular action we can consider it right or wrong according to these frameworks, while the agent-centered approach. It's the one typical of virtue ethics, which is the other approach that Malcolm mentioned there. And it is more around the character and the virtues of the person that actually makes the decisions. So I would say that for the ethics of finance, as it is structured now, we need a holistic approach that take the best of these approaches, but we need to take into account that we need to be very centered on the agent and to make the agent aware of the responsibility that the agent him or herself has, because this is the centrality of the human person is still there, even if there's, as Brad is saying, a lot of automation. And in this way, we also need to rediscover a bit what is finance, not just what is ethics. So I don't know if
and does that have implications on education and the way we educate people?
Yeah, I would say that it has a big impact on the way we perform our education system in general. No? For the ethics of finance, for example, in light of the transformation of both finance and the world, I guess every one of us now is, we're, for example, in this panel, we're all at home, which is kind of unusual not to be on this discussion and not being in the same place. So I would say that the combination between the impact of the COVID pandemic and the raising innovation will bring us to update our way of delivering education. So for the ethics of finance, we will need to update for sure our teaching style. Then we will need to keep teaching the basics, because even if a lot of processes are automated, still the people behind the processes need to understand how these machines are set. Yeah. And then I would say, and that's my, I would say I'm biased in saying this, but we really need to have a standalone finance ethics module in each program for continuous professional development that we have in finance or in higher education. So
thanks
that
so
I would
much
say
for
something.
that. I was asking with direct interest, sitting in a business school where we do have a course on ethics, and actually I was mentioning earlier Professor Claude de Bicquigny, who started that class at INSEAD, but the importance also of embedding it in the actual finance course and having that reflection together. Anyway, a good note to take home. So Stéphane, the question I wanted to ask you, we've had a perspective from citizens engagement, and that's maybe activism, educational perspective. What does that mean for your company, for an institution, a financial institution like you? What are the new ethical challenge that a company like yours is faced with?
I believe, Katel, it does not create per se for Euroclear itself ethical challenges, but perhaps based on the discussion we just had, it goes in both directions. First, you see an increased level of automation, of digitization and digitalization, and going much more in the direction of self-service on one hand, and on the other side, it will, as an industry, help us to go much more for value-based approach. Linking back a little bit to the moral distance mentioned by Paul a few minutes ago, increase our client interaction, increase client focus, increase as Brett mentioned, client intimacy on the other hand. So what you gain on one hand will enable you to increase client intimacy and become more and more relevant for your client. All the debate about KYC is key in that perspective. Now, of course, we know that finance, banking, insurance domain are more and more data-driven. It is a fact. And hence, the increase and the more and more prominent usage of robotization, robots, attended or unattended robots, and the usage more and more of AI. Now the question will remain on how to integrate ethical challenge while increasing digitalization in our financial industry. What is, by the way, perhaps not the most modern, compared to other industry. Yeah, and we've seen that thanks to or due to, it's a pity, but due to the sanitary crisis we're going through now for the last 12 months, you have seen a acceleration in terms of digitalization in the financial industry, and that's perhaps also a benefit to increase service to the clients. Yeah, but looking at all what is data management, all what is AI, industry can become smarter, perhaps cheaper, and one part of this benefit can be perhaps also brought back or passed to the client, but also beyond the cost reduction, I see also a number of domains where we can contribute to reduce some risks. Yeah. Because being an industry that is perhaps not the most modern, and I will take an example that is close to my heart, tax domain, and we see that there are a number of tax reform ongoing, and there was a very good paper published by the OECD in the tax domain, further digitalization and perhaps also further AI usage and leveraging more data for some state, in particular some European state, would improve their capacity to collect the right level of tax for the country they are entitled to. And last but not least, I want to insist on the fact that in our industry, like in other industry, actors in a market are competing on products, on service level. But this dimension of ethical behavior is a non-competing dimension. You don't compete on that one. So the market in general should look at ethical behavior, at ethical dimension as something that is serving common good, public good, in order to serve the society we are living in.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think this non-competitive aspect is important for organizations and for schools as well. You know, these are topics that are not non-competitive. I just wanted to also to flag that here. So I'm going to start taking some questions from our audience, because we have many coming in, and I'm going to also ask Paul and Josina to maybe come back with us in particular, because I wanted to start with the first question on that Boris is asking us on whether we have a generational dimension to that conversation here. And I know that you mentioned that when we prepped that the CFA Institute actually did some research on that. So could you help us and give us some element of response? Is the new generation, younger people, more concerned about financial ethics?
Yes, thank you very much, Catel. And there are a couple of things. To respond to Boris's question, and also about the career, this perception that ethics is important for your career, I would say one thing. We did a study together with the Economist Intelligence Unit back in 2014, where we asked middle managers what was important. They all said, yes, an ethics code is important, but I'm going to be flexible with it if I have to promote my career. So that was in 2014. In the meantime, CFA Institute has been doing yearly investor trust studies. And what is apparent is that investor trust in financial services has moved up. It used to be lowest on the scale, even below media, and that's saying a lot. It is still not where it should be. And in the last one we did, which was pre-pandemic, it came out in March 2020, you can find it on our website, really you saw that there was trust, but that young people paradoxically trusted the digital world and anything that came through an app more, and older people, baby boomers, trusted personal financial advice more. However, the perception of all, I would say majority of respondents, was that they were very uneasy about a next financial crisis. Now that was before the pandemic, and you see what we are. Right? Yes. I mean, we have GameStop, we have Greensill, we have the SPACs coming out, we have the Credit Suisse. The ball is really starting to roll at the moment. And we have the search for yield. So we're in a very, very challenging environment. And add to that, the Edelman Trust, who we used to work with, and we still do, but they came out with their own survey on society this year. And what is interesting with that is that we're also in a societal shift where people are trusting the companies they work for more than they trust governments.
Yep.
Where they see that companies have to lead on societal issues. Now that goes back to that sustainable world we're in. But can we really democratize companies? They're responsible to the shareholders. So we have this real weird world. Put to that, the European Parliament came out with a study recently on what they expect in post-COVID world. So they have four scenarios. They say ethical capitalism, competitive capitalism, cooperative governance, or strategic autonomy. Now, which way do we go? And I'll leave it back to that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so these are all good topics to write on, because obviously, as you rightly mentioned, COVID has also changed this dynamic. We have a couple of clarifying questions that I'd like to make sure we respond to. First, one for you, Paul. You mentioned, and that's from Henrik, you mentioned get behind the data to get to reality. I think Brett also got into this. Can you give an example from your perspective about what that means? The assumption, as Henrik said, is that data is usually a good way to get to the most trustful view of reality.
Well, I would just give an example of a recent study that we did on bankruptcies. So if you go to banking statistics of bankruptcies, bankers whom I met look at figures at their dashboards and they decree that their company is bankruptcy without asking or trying to investigate what is the cause of the bankruptcy and to what extent the enterprise can be rescued. This requires a visit on the spot and the thorough, let's say, investigation, which is probably costly. So if you stick to statistics, saying this and this enterprise has an index of -2, and you let them go bust, it's one way of behaving. The other way of behaving is to go and to see these people and to understand what is going on and what can be repaired. So this is sticking to figures, sticking to graphs, forgetting that there is a reality behind the graphs. And I think this, you can add this kind of examples. So the point is to understand what the figures represent and what they do not capture, and to what extent between what they capture and they do not capture, there is a room for action that can be business motivated, but can also be ethics motivated.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Marta, I'm going to direct a couple of questions to you, which have to do, I don't know if you're looking at them.
Okay, yes.
Teaching ethics, I'm sure you're looking. How young do we need to start, basically? And anyway, so you've read the questions, and how do we teach ethics?
Okay, how do we teach ethics? Was this?
Yes, and yeah, so, I mean, yeah. Sorry. So maybe you were. Yeah, I can try to summarize for you. I mean, should we start, quite early on in curriculum?
Okay.
And how do we make sure it's embedded in the human system? Yes, and the second question from Ignacio goes along the same way. I mean, do you consider that the introduction of ethics concept, application, and philosophy during basic school would be a benefit for future e-workers?
Yeah, so thanks for summing up all these questions together, because they are all related in a way. So I would say that the teaching of philosophy, more than ethics in particular, I think should start as early as we can. Probably the best level is the high school level. So if we need to think that a lot of our jobs and a lot of the activities that we're doing, they're little by little, they're going to be we're not going to be replaced in our work, because only humans can work, okay? But machines can do. So we need to be better equipped to be very good, independent and critical thinkers. And this needs to start very early. So in high school, it's good to have the introduction of, for example, a class of philosophy, so that students can start reflecting of the big questions of life. And this will make them better university students if they go to university. If they don't, they will have some tools to reflect on the job they're going to do. So I would say this can be probably the earliest we can start with that. And regarding the how to teach ethics, so the specific teaching of ethics can be depending on the level of education where we are. Usually what I think it's very effective is to give a good solid ground theoretical basis at the beginning of the teaching of ethics, and then apply these tools for thinking to case studies, especially if we are in a business school, where, for example, I teach in a business school. So this probably is the only more philosophical module that students can get. And if we are in continuous professional development as well. So good theoretical knowledge at the beginning, and then applications through case studies that can make the teaching of ethics alive, and with critical thinking, discussions, interactions. Yeah.
Thanks, Marta. Brett, I don't know if I can put these questions to you, but let me try. And if it's, I can move to someone else. But we have some questions connected to the interface of digitalization, finance, and let's say the poor or the excluded, or let's say the global south. We have a question from Jose asking, can we use that to help connect the underbanked, the uneducated in finance? And we have a broader question also on the connection between, and that was from Ralph, on the connection between that agenda and official development cooperation, humanitarian aid, international cooperation in general, so like North-South relationships.
Sure. The way that I would approach this is I kind of like reframe it somewhat.
Yeah.
I come from quite a Marxist background. So when I'm looking at this issue, what I see is profit-seeking behavior that drives markets, right? So, and then people sort of after the fact will attempt to sort of justify it or put positive spins or negative spins or whatever. But in the end, the sort of structure of the market is moving in a certain direction, kind of regardless of what people want, all right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a sort of good position to start with. Because if you look, for example, the fintech industry will spend a lot of time finding good reasons why fintech is supposed to be good. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, because the reason why it's happening is that firms will use it to cut costs, regardless of whether it's quote unquote good or not. All right. So if you can find ways to make it good within the framework of market profit seeking, then great. But if not, well, too bad. All right. So that's the sort of the de facto structure of the market and how it's working, especially in an uncoordinated system where no individual firm can control things because they all having to compete against each other. So they will always be trying to do this regardless of what the individual moral agents within them actually want, right? So a lot of the ideology of finance is about finding after the fact justifications, one of which right now is about financial inclusion. Okay, so the whole story about people in the developing world will benefit from digital technology, et cetera, et cetera. Well, maybe not, but that's in some ways not the point. The point is that the financial sector is expanding into new profit frontiers, all right? And if you can use technology to drive down the cost of doing that, it will do that, all right? Because that's what the structure of the profit-seeking structure of the market will do. So in that context, I mean, I've worked, for example, with the UN UNRWA, the Research Institute for Social Development, about what's called solidarity finance, all right, which is often a very different paradigm to financial inclusion. Solidarity finance is often about finding ways for like actual autonomous communities to build their own systems, whereas what's generally called financial inclusion is about large players seeping outwards into the peripheries where they haven't engulfed yet. Okay, and that might be a good thing if you are in a global market system where if you're not engulfed by the big players, you're at a disadvantage. But we mustn't beat around the bush and pretend that there's no power dynamics in this. The basic point is that if you are not engulfed by the banks, you will be at a disadvantage. All right, and that's why we have to be have to build political counter movements to ensure that those market processes actually benefit people.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Can you share also the title of your upcoming book, because people are asking? Well,
sure. It's called Cloud Money, Cash, Crypto, and the War for Our Wallets.
There we go. So you have it all. Watch out. Watch this space. Stefan, I want to give you one question. Again, same thing. If you don't think you're the right person, you let me know. But we have a question from Elko here asking, what can we expect anything from current leadership in the investment industry? And we could enlarge that to the financial industry, I would argue, when it comes to board, executive management, which largely didn't learn ethics and who are causing scandals after scandal. So there is a position here, but I think the role of senior management, of boards, of the executive team, what's your view on that?
It's a very interesting question from our jury member.
Well, do we need to wait for a new generation? Basically, it's a question.
No, I don't believe so, and I believe it's more and more the case in a number of governing bodies, being risk committees, being NGC, being audit committee, and boards. I believe this is the case, but it still needs to continue to improve in a number of domains. It's the question of in terms of leadership, in terms of role modeling, in terms of openly communicated on a number of elements for which perhaps we have not communicated or discussed enough for the last decades. Is something that is, according to me, less and less a hurdle or a taboo in terms of exchange of views around a board table. And I believe we need to continue to foster that and encourage that. It's like a decade ago, the discussion about the diversity, inclusion, becoming more and more open. ESG debate, it will impact and fundamentally change our society. So I believe, yes, increasing awareness, communication, and debate, like this afternoon, is certainly contributing to that.
Yeah, thanks for this. And I mean, yeah, like any transformation and any responsibility, the role of board is key. That is something also to keep in mind. This one I'm going to have to give to you, Paul, because it comes from our friend Henri-Claude. So, and also it's about the prize in general. What can be learned from the impact of prize laureates paper and the impact they had in their own organization? To know that may help us find ways to enlarge further impact of the prize on the financial community. So those who've been involved with the prize for a while and have that big overview, what's your answer to that? Paul, I'll start with you.
So thank you very much. A very important question, the leverage. I will start with the very first winner of the prize. She was working in an Australian bank and she wrote a rather radical paper about the ethical strategy of the bank. So the boss was asked if he could pay their trip from Australia to Geneva, and that in principle he agreed, but he wanted to see the paper. He saw the paper and offered her the job to create an ethical department in the institution. Today she's teaching, etc. She is an expert, international expert in terms of ethical finance. Okay, so that's one example. There are many others. There are examples in the regulators. There are also examples within companies. One of the major English bank, one of the winning essays, I think it was the 4th or 5th edition of the prize, so about 10 years ago, got really promoted to broaden his idea, to deepen his idea, and to try to put them, let's say, in practical terms within the institution. We have also 1 or 2 winners from regulators, and we have a number of young professors that have been giving chairs or have seen chairs created for them to deepen and to teach ethics in finance. Not ethics of finance, but ethics in finance. So, well, of course, we cannot overestimate the impact, but these are potential changers. Yeah. So and these changers are not coming only from, let's say, the Western part of the world, but many of them are coming also from other parts of the world where finance means things a little bit different than it means in the city or in the heart of Paris or Brussels.
Thanks, Paul. Stefan is waving his hand. You have to admit
No,
yourself. Yeah.
Catal,
Right.
it's also, and we had it also internally at Euroclear, is by also increasing the network, increasing the debate, the conversation, and also exposing your young talent. Sometimes you lose them. Yeah. One of our contributors, who wrote an essay 2 years ago, was poached by one of our colleagues, client competitor.
It's a non-competitive
in the market.
topic, remember.
No, but we compete for talent. Yeah. So you don't compete on ethics and trust in finance, but you compete for talent, and that's good. That's good. Yeah. I lost some people within the group moving to other departments. I do believe, and that's my personal conviction, that increasing the network of those young talented people reflecting about ethics in finance is per se a very nice objective and a very nice result. And if they work for company A, B, C, D, department X, Y, Z, as long as they continue to share that type of new vision.
Yeah, thanks very much, Stefan. I think I've given everybody a little chance for promoting their publications or what they do, but not with you, Marta. And someone is asking what kind of ethical training module are now available to banks. So anything you can promote from what you do in your school. I mean, I could do it from Isabel. Go ahead. Any modules that people can attend to, because that's important. The lifelong learning aspect of this topic is fundamental. So Marta.
Yeah, no, I would say, no, that's a good question. Thanks. I think that they just posted in the chat one of the articles that I wrote recently. Actually, all the material on the Observatoire de la Finance website is good as well. And as for modules, I think that if you are in an organization that cares about people and their improvement, as Stefan is actually saying, so you might just ask if you can attend one of these modules. I personally, I've just finished running big for numbers standalone business ethics module, like an introduction to ethics for business leaders on one of the online platforms that are available at the moment. It was even available for free for the month of March. So I think that the opportunities are there if people really want to have the opportunity to grow in their personal knowledge and moral development. So I think that just look for them, especially now with the COVID pandemic accelerated the process of moving teaching online. So I think these courses are getting better. I mean, probably nobody would have fancied online course a few years ago, but now it's the new normal. So get there, and if you want a more structured paths for personal growth and development, I would say that a good manager is always someone that can open you the door for a good education in ethics, especially if you work in a bank.
This is great. Thank you so much, Marta. And actually, I'm just going to go quickly to everybody now before passing on to Hodina to close this event. Just, I think we've given, food for thought for people who are interested in competing. You also have a number of links. I'm going to ask now if every one of you, beside your own publication, if there is a place or space that you would suggest that attendees look or monitor to be kept abreast or to think a little bit more about this topic. Brett, would you have, I mean, of course, there is your blog, we mentioned it. Any other places where we can get more food for thought on this or monitor the conversation on this very important topic?
I don't actually have a ready-made answer for that, to be honest. I'm trying to think what I think one of the, I'll just say for me, one of the biggest weaknesses right now in most analysis around finance tends to be around monetary understanding.
Yeah.
And it's probably most viscerally witnessed in the sort of sheer amount of disinformation that spreads around cryptocurrencies, what are called cryptocurrencies. I mean, I've worked in that space for a long time, but I can tell you that the vast majority of information being pushed out in that space is complete and utter crap. And unfortunately, it's going mainstream, that type of information. So I think I would encourage anybody who's interested in getting into these topics, to be open to new stuff, but to go deep into sort of critical monetary theory, including anthropology of money as a basis for starting to understand finance more generally, upon which you can then actually start to make sort of sound judgments about finance and so on. So that's, I'm just going to say that as a sort of a base level, but then
that's a good, but I think I'll take that. That's a great teaser and a space to watch that is indeed getting a lot of attention. So to be careful there. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brett. Stéphane, I'm going to ask you, what's the space to watch?
I want to take the opportunity to answer the last question. Can you compete in acting ethically? Yes, of course. But the question is, why would you behave unethically in order to compete?
Well, I didn't know if that's what the one I was going to throw to everybody to close, but thanks for answering it. This is great. Paul, I'm going to leave you. Of course, we need to look at all the essays that have been submitted to the prize, because that's a good way of keeping the pulse, right? But what else? Anything else from your perspective? You have to unmute yourself, Paul.
I think that one of the very interesting lesson material is reading the daily press, because you have technical reports and you have number of events during the last 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months, that from Wirecard to Danone and so on and so on. Many of them are just ethical questions are somewhere hidden into this material. Ethical dilemmas that you have to figure out what were the ethical dilemmas that people were facing. Some of them have identified the dilemma, others have bypassed it. So I think it is critical reading daily press with this kind of questioning. What were the situations in which ethical issues were at stake, and to what extent different actors did recognize them, either as regulators or actors or shareholders or board members or young professionals, etc., is an excellent exercise to make the ethical awareness clearer and more forceful in your daily life, I think, professional life.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, a good reminder. Paul, Stéphane, Marta, Brett, thank you so much for joining us today. Christina, the floor is to you to close this event.
Thank you very much, Catel, and thank you for the panelists and, of course, Paul. I think this short and very succinct debate highlighted exactly what is at issue. We're at a changing time in society, and we have the younger generation that we shouldn't destroy their future. And the Vatican has been working on finance for the common good for a long time now. But it's not just in the Vatican that people are reflecting on whether finance should be for the common good and the good of society. The EU is reflecting on this. It's in our mission statement. Companies are now repurposing themselves as companies with a mission for the good of society. The case of Danone, although that's a double-edged sword. So this world is refocusing. It is not just about climate change. It's about the future of our society. It's about how we all interact with each other. And that brings me to the point that digitalization is both a tool and a danger point. It's a tool, and I think Brett shows, how you can use it to optimize cost cutting, etc. I would add to that, robo-advice is being used essentially for the sort of more profortunate, higher net worth people in order to build their case. You have all sorts of examples with that. But I think what is important is to realize that the ethical behavior that is in all of us, and Marta said you should start at school teaching ethics. It's that ethical behavior is leading us to be true human beings living and with our footprint on this world, and how we build it and what kind of system of interaction we have with each other. It's not all about shareholder value anymore. It still is to a large extent, but the debate is enlarging to the stakeholder concept. That stakeholder concept means how we interact with each other, what we do for the economy, for each other. And I think that is where this ethics debate is really centered in this whole change in society. I think all of the panelists gave wonderful comments from their different perspectives. I would really encourage you all to participate, because we love reading your essays. I love reading essays in the summertime. I do it by the pool in Greece, and I really enjoy it. And we have great jury discussions. So please do participate. You have different options for languages. You have till the 31st of May, and your career may change. Thank you, Catel.
And this is it. I'm coming back to thank the people who've done all the good work in the back end and made this possible. There is Virgile Perret from the Observatoire de la Finance, Anna Dessa, and Tabi Dominé, my team, who made that event possible for you. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catel.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Catel. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers, guys. Bye.